Hello everybody, and welcome to Manor Inn. We're here in the kitchen. My name's John, and I'm the guy here at the inn who makes the pies. And today we're going to give a demonstration about making pie crust, the pie crust that we use here at the inn. I get questions from people all the time about how we make our pie crust, so I thought I'd do a demonstration of exactly how we do it, and then we'll use that pie crust to make a Maine blueberry pie. Normally at this time of year we're getting ready for our Pies on Parade event. And if you don't know what that is, it's an event that takes place here in January throughout Rockland. And it's a two-day event. And last year, 27 different venues participated, and they each make their own favorite pie of one type or another. Sometimes some are savory and some are sweet. And then guests can travel around by bus from one venue to the next, trying all the different pies that they would like to try. So the important thing about this event, that all the proceeds that are gained from ticket sales are used to donate to the Area Interfaith Outreach Organization, which is a local food bank organization that provides support for food insecure people and people that energy insecure people. So we've been doing the Pies on Parade event here in Rockland since 2005. If you would like to find out more information about that event, you can click the link at the bottom of this post and find out more information about Pies on Parade. The Maine is like in the top 10 of states in the United States for food insecurity, and what that means that 1 out of every 5 child in Maine is food insecure. If you would like, you could donate money to the AIO by clicking another link at the bottom of this video. So now we're going to make some pie, so we'll get started. You gather together my stuff. Alright, so I have here 300 grams of King Arthur all-purpose flour. I have 227 grams of butter. I'm using European style 84% fat butter for this recipe because it gives a really nice flavor and texture to the pie dough. I've got about 119 grams of ice cold water. It's really important to keep your butter and your water very cold for this recipe so that the butter doesn't melt. I'm going to put the butter in, work the butter in 2 stages. This is called a 2-stage crust. So I'm just going to dump in the first stage. I'm going to break it apart with my hands. So I've cut this butter into about 1/2-inch pieces. So just drop it into the bowl, work it around a little bit with some flour. I'm going to take a pastry cutter and I'm going to start to cut the butter into the pastry. I'm taking this pastry cutter and I'm actually working up the sides of the bowl. I'm not just pounding into it. And the reason for that is I want to coat the flour with butter. Flour has proteins in it that are called gluten, and in its dry state they're basically like powdered gluten. When you add water to the flour, you basically create gluten strains. So we don't want a whole lot of gluten in this pie dough because we want it to be tender. So periodically you'll stop and you just knock the butter off of the pastry cutter with your hands. And what you're looking for is a crumb that's about the size of peas. So I'll just keep working this in, going up the sides. And I'm pretty happy with the way that looks. I've got some flour here with pea-sized butter in it. Now I'll take the second stage and I'm going to drop that in. So the first stage of the butter, the purpose is to make the dough tender. But we want a tender and a flaky pie crust. So now we're going to incorporate the butter in a way that will give us flakes. So I'm going to mix this up with flour again. You're going to start to create little leaves with your fingers. One at a time, just flatten them out, drop them back in. The butter has water. There's water trapped in this butter right now. It's an emulsion of fat and water. And when you make a pie crust and put it in the oven, the water is going to convert into steam, and that steam is going to create lift, and that lift will give you the flaky layers that you want in a flaky pie crust. So it's important that the butter doesn't melt, because if the water escapes, then you don't have water to create steam and you're not going to have a flaky pie dough. So we work as fast as we can, but using butter from the refrigerator is fine. It doesn't need to be frozen, but it should be cold out of the refrigerator. So we're going to flatten all of these pieces. If you're ambidextrous, you can use two hands. Once you feel like you have them all in, then I'm going to take this dough and I'm going to do what's called the windshield wiper technique. I'm just going to take the butter, I'm going to work it into this flour, the purpose being to break these sleeves into a little bit smaller pieces and to make sure that my flour is coated with butter so that it doesn't absorb so much of the water that we're going to add to it. Because water helps create gluten, and we don't want a lot of gluten in our pie dough. So I'm just going through this. If I find any pieces that I haven't flattened out, I'll flatten those out, but I think I'm pretty good here. I think that's good. So you should have something that looks something like that. You've got some flat pieces there. There's some little pea-sized pieces that are going to help make the dough tender. And now we're going to add some water. Move this out of the way. We're going to do that. So this is 119 grams, or about a half of a cup. We'll have the ingredients for this pie recipe at the bottom of the post, and it'll have grams and ounces, or in cups if you measure in cups. I like to weigh all my ingredients with a scale because you get more consistent results. So I'm just going to put all this water in at one time. I'll take my bowl scraper. I'm going to work the water into the dough. Just making sure I incorporate it. You can use a fork to do this. Some people like to use their hands, but I don't like to get the butter too soft, so I find a bowl scraper works pretty well. I'm not looking for a cohesive dough at this point, so don't worry if it looks like a big shaggy mess, because that's the way that it's supposed to look. So as you go along, if you get this on your scraper, just take a bench scraper or a knife or something and scrape it off. So I'm pretty happy with this. I'm going to dump it out on the table, and what you get is a, looks like a powdery mess. So if it looks like a cohesive dough, you've worked it a little too much. So I'm going to take this bench scraper and I'm going to start to make folds and just fold it over about 6 times. That's going to help build up the layers. And I turn it 90 degrees. I'm going to lift it up and I'm just going to start to just lightly sort of massage the butter and the flour together, turning it each side each time. Pull it all together. Just gather up all the little stragglers as you find them. I'll do this 3 or 4 times until it comes together. If it looks like it's starting to stick to your countertop, don't add more flour to it. You're basically about done. You can see it coming together nicely, and it's not a powdered mass anymore. So if it starts to stick, you're finished. So work it into a little loaf-looking thing like that. Shoot for about half. Don't worry if it's not exact. And then if you look at that, you should see flaky layers. So this is, always take time to do that and say, ooh, I'm going to spit these, because you worked hard to get those layers. So have a look and appreciate what you've done. You're going to flatten that out. Turn it cut side down. Take your bench scraper, put it together. I'll have your plastic next door, so I don't have to worry about that quite so much. So gather up any dry bits you haven't put in there. They're going to hydrate as the dough rests. It may look a little dry now, but after it rests, it will come together. Flatten it out like that. press down with your, try not to touch too much with my hands, but free to touch it enough to bring it together. And there you've got the top and the bottom crust. Put this in the refrigerator for at least 30 minutes. Will last up to 3 days in the refrigerator. I usually let mine sit overnight before I use it again. That gives it gluten time to relax and the butter and water time to hydrate the dough, and you'll be good to go. So now we're going to roll out some dough to make a pie, and I have one here that I made a couple of days ago. And what I do is I'll take both pieces, I'll put them both on the scale, and the heaviest one gets to be the bottom crust. So that's this guy. I need some flour out of the flour thing. So as you can see, it's come together and looks like a pretty nice pie dough. I'm going to put down a little bit of bench flour, a little bit on top. I like to use a French rolling pin. You can use ball bearing pin if you want with handles. If you're going to do that, make sure you just hold the handles. Try to press flat the entire time. If you use a pin like this, a French pin, you always want to work from the center of the dough. You want to have your hand spread out underneath the width of the dough. So I'm going to start quarter turn. As the dough widens out, I will move my hands out. But just make sure you're always working from the center up and back. Do not go over top of the dough like that, because you'll flatten and curve. You don't want to do that. So just stop short, rotating it a quarter of an inch, a quarter way around will give you a nice even pie dough. I notice that if you let these sit overnight, they tend to roll out a little bit better than if you use them, within a half an hour or so. But either way will work. So I'm just going to keep rolling this out. I'm looking for about a 13-inch diameter circle, and that will be enough for a 9-inch pie plate and give you a nice thin crust. If you want your crust a little bit thicker, you can stop a little bit short of that, somewhere between 12 and a half inches. I wouldn't give any less than that. So I'm just rotating, going to the center forward, center back. This one's rolling out pretty well. If yours doesn't roll out in a perfect circle, don't worry about it. If it falls apart, you can put it in the plate in pieces if you need to. Butter crust is very forgiving. If you notice it's sticking to the bottom a little bit, I use this soap hat here. If you're working with the dough and it feels like it's getting too wet, you can always take this thing, put it on a tray, pop it in the refrigerator for 5-10 minutes or so, and then go back to rolling again. If you take your dough out about 15 minutes before you get started, this dough is pretty nice to work with, so you shouldn't have a problem. We're getting pretty close. If you want to, you can use these things called pastry rollers if you worry about having an uneven crust or you don't do this on a regular basis. These are 1/8 of an inch thick. They're you can buy them on Amazon. They're called pie tracks, and it will help you maintain the right thickness. I don't really use them, but they are available if it makes you feel more comfortable. So I'm going to measure this now and see where we're at. We should be pretty close, about 12 inches. Another little trick I like to use is if you have a tapered rolling pin, these are pretty cool. You can go around the edges, or if you're having a particular part of your dough that's thicker than the rest, you can lift it up, and you see I'm not really pressing on this part of the dough, and just focus on the areas of the dough that you think may need to be worked out a little bit. So I'll finish this one off using that. I didn't really like these the first time I started using them, but kind of gotten used to it, and I use it a lot actually. So I'm thinking that's pretty close. 12 and a half. Always work from the center out. Don't go over the edge. think we're there. So I like to use these Pyrex clear bowls, and when we get to the end I'll talk about baking the pie and why I like to use Pyrex. But you can sit that down. I can see that's more than enough. There's a lot of different ways. You know, they fold your dough like this and put it in if you want. Quite frankly, I just pick it up, put it in there, because the dough is pretty forgiving. So now I want to make sure I get the corners in tight. Spin it around. I've got enough crust overlapping to fold my top crust. And we're ready to put in the filling. So for the filling I use Maine blueberries. I like the product, Wyman's product. They have the best frozen fruit, I think. And if fruit's not in season, you're always better to use frozen fruit, especially nowadays because they quick freeze it while it's fresh and you'll get the best results. So to 4 cups of blueberries, I've added 1/2 cup of sugar. And I've mixed that sugar with clear gel as my thickener. I use instant clear gel, so clear gel comes in 2 different types. There's instant and there's cooked type. For this recipe, the way I'm making it, make sure you use instant. Make sure to mix the sugar and the clear gel together in a separate bowl with a fork or spatula or something before you add it into the blueberries, or that thickener will clump up on you. So I mix the sugar and the clear gel together, put it in the bowl, add a pinch of salt, a tablespoon of lemon juice, and that's all that I have in here. And that helps to bring out, accentuate the flavor of the blueberries. If you like your pie a little on the sweet side, you can add more sugar, up to 1 cup if you want. It's really a preference, your choice. I like just enough to offset the tartness of the blueberries and kind of showcase the flavor of those blueberries. Just dump it in like that and level it out. Get my bottom crust. I already have a bottom crust rolled out here, so you don't have to go through that process again. I'm going to lay it over top. Again, I go to about 13 inches. If you like your pie crust, to be thicker, you can make the pie crust a little bit, 12 inches or so. But I like mine to be thin and flaky. So I'm going to cut this pie dough about the distance from my fingertip to the first joint, and that just happens to be on these Pyrex about the depth of this handle. So I'm going to kind of use that as my guide. Doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to tuck it all in anyway. But make sure you get both the top and the bottom crust cut. You need a sharp knife for this if you have one, if you want to. Some people like to do that. I just find scissors work best for me. So once you've got it all trimmed up, we're going to take both pieces now and we're going to tuck them under. Just tuck them into the plate. The purpose is to make sure you seal this enough that the pie filling is not going to leak out while you're baking. Just spin it around. I don't like a real thick or sort of high crust, because I've noticed here at the end that if I do that, a lot of that comes back on the plate uneaten. So I like to do you can do the fluted thing if you want with your fingers and flute it. I don't like that. I like mine to look simple. Need a knife. Alright, so I'm happy with this. I just like to finish my crust just with a simple finish. If the dough feels cold enough, I go ahead and make my vent cuts at this time. If it feels like it may be a little soft, depends on the temperature in your kitchen, and just freeze it without making these cuts and you can put them in before you pop it in the oven. It's really no problem. I just do a simple, this allows steam to escape and also marks where the innkeepers are going to cut the pie when they get ready to slice it up. So it serves two functions. And that is pretty much it. So I would egg wash this when I'm ready to bake it, put it in the freezer for about 20 minutes. The recipe for the egg wash is going to be down with the ingredients for the pie. Take it out after 20 minutes. I put a second coating of the egg wash on it. Put it in the oven at 400 degrees. I like to use a baking steel to bake the pie on because it helps get the bottom of the crust completely baked, and bake it until it's done. I would say, if it's frozen, it's going to take an hour and 10, hour and 15 minutes. In my oven, every 20 minutes I turn it. After the first 20 minutes, I put this guy on top of it to protect the top of the crust from burning, and just keep going until I start to see the fruit bubble up through the vent holes. At that point, I know it's cooking, and I'm going to give it about 10 minutes more. I'll take it out at that point. I take a shaker with some powdered sugar in it, and I powder sugar the top of the pie crust. I put it back in and give it about another 10 minutes for that pie filling to really cook. If you think about making pie filling on the stove, you're going to bring it up to a simmer and let it cook for a little while. But it needs to do the same thing in this pie crust. So once you see the filling coming up, it's not done, it's just starting to cook, and you need to give it at least 10 minutes more so that it completely cooks. So once you get it to that point, and I'll set this one aside and take something out of the oven that looks like this, and then you're done. You've got a Maine blueberry pie that's ready to eat. So I'm just going to go ahead and you can feel, I can hear the pie, the flakes in this pie as I'm cutting through it. You can see on the top. And this is what guests like so much about this pie dough, is that it's really nice and flaky. So here we go, Maine blueberry pie here at Barre Manor Inn. Thanks for watching this video. If you can, go to the bottom and click the link on the Area Interfaith Outreach Organization. They really need your help. This winter we had to cancel the Pies on Parade event because of COVID. And we are planning for the 2022 event. But if you can help out, we really appreciate it. Try this, making a pie, post some pictures of it if you like, or if you want to, you can make it and try some, and then come up here for a visit and try some of ours and see how they compare. So thank you again, and stay safe.